7:49 p.m., 8/17/2024. I'm currently digesting a large sandwich and semi-regretting of getting double meat, but semi-not regretting because it was delicious. The first bite of the sandwich, I almost choked to death. Please chew your food accordingly. Chew it not 24 times, but more than once or twice, so it can pass through your esophagus safely and not block your windpipe. Thank you. I had to, why am I saying this? I took a bite of a sandwich, and it was too big of a bite. And I had that awful feeling of like, holy shit, this is getting stuck. And TMI, watch out, viewer. I had to do the thing where you stick your finger down your throat to make yourself throw up because it got stuck. And it's like, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. It didn't get stuck, but it was good. I mean, it was getting to that point where it was like, okay, you're gonna choke if you don't do something. I don't know why this is my life, because I didn't chew enough for the sandwich, and I didn't puke it up, I hawked it back up. So any glamorous feelings any of you'll have for me, I hacked up my sandwich today to not die from choking on it. I was gonna say I didn't want to pull a Mama Cass, but that's just lore. I don't think she really choked on a ham sandwich. But I don't want to die by choking on a turkey sandwich. Anyway, earlier today, I finished reading the play middle of the night, and I have this book. Maybe I can show it. Get my disgusting pillow out of the way so y'all don't see it. I don't know if I should turn on my light or not, but here, I'll show. I have my Paddy Chayefsky book. And, let's see. I read... I need to blow my nose. Middle of the Night. I read that today. And the next play... is called The 10th Man. So, I didn't want to spoil it for myself, but I did look a little bit, and let's see. Here, I'll read to you a little bit. To Tyrone Guthrie, The 10th Man was first presented by Saint Suber and Arthur Cantor at the Booth Theater, New York City, November 5th, 1959, with the following cast. Okay, so wait, before I get started, I want to make a note that Gina Rowlands passed away this week. And Gina Rowlands was Betty in the original run of Middle of the Night. So, with Edward G. Robinson as Jerry. And ain't that a solid casting? And they had Martin Balsam did the stage play as the son-in-law. But Gina Rowlands, she died this week. And so rest in peace to Gina. I think I'm ashamed to admit I don't know her filmography that well. I think she's in Woman on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, which I started once and didn't finish it. That's one of those movies where, like, I don't think I was in the right mood for it, and I'm planning to get back to it, and I haven't gotten back to it yet. But rest in peace, Gina. Yeah, and I just have a nasty hangnail that's all bloody right now because I pick at it. It's disgusting. Sorry. Apologize. Oh, and I also have my Shakespeare book. Shakespeare is in bed with me. But look how pretty it is. It's all golden, right? See how pretty that is? Shakespeare is He's a little difficult. Look at that. I've read some of it, but not, can you imagine getting through that? But if I can get through Gore Vidal's, I can get through this, right? Isn't that pretty? Anyway. So, The 10th Man. I keep thinking of The Third Man with Orson Welles. That's also another movie I actually have, but haven't seen and haven't finished. Let's see. So there's going to be a lot of Judaism terms that I'm going to butcher because I'm a Gentile and I don't know any better. And I'm not going to read the whole play because this is like 100 pages. But right now I'm not. But let's see. I'm looking through the cast list and I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody listed. Maybe if I looked them up and looked at their wikis, I would. But the Kabbalist, the Sexton, the Schlissel, Zatorsky, Alper, Foreman, the girl, Evelyn Foreman, Arthur Landau, Harris, the rabbi, Kessler boys, and the policeman. So check this shit out. Okay. It's an Orthodox synagogue. I am so vanilla, so not Jewish. So I think I'm the blandest. Okay, if you had a charcuterie of human beings, like a little sample of everybody, I think I'm the blandest person on that person palette that could be. I am so white and so much a Gentile. I don't have any flair whatsoever to me. So apologies for the butchering. But this is set in an Orthodox synagogue with the first act before the morning prayers. The second act is divided into two scenes, the morning prayers and before the afternoon prayers. And Act 3 is the exorcism. Okay. So, like I said, I'm not going to read the whole thing right now. A big part of me wants to go to sleep, but I can't go to sleep right now because it's too early. So let's dive in and read a little bit. Let's see. And this is just a loose reading, just for kicks. Let's see. Act 1. Remember, this is a non-Jewish person reading about a Jewish play. Because Paddy was Jewish. And if I know I'm going to read some slurs, and I won't know that they're slurs. I don't want to. Here we go. Interior of the synagogue of the congregation Uttereth Tifereth Yisrael. It is a poor congregation, and the synagogue is actually a converted shop. A raised platform surrounded by a railing contains the lectern and the Holy Ark. This altar is surrounded by rows of plain wooden folding chairs, which constitute the seating accommodations for the congregation. On the far side of the altar is an old desk at which the rabbi presides when teaching Hebrew school. A partitioned area downstage right is the rabbi's study, a crowded little cubicle containing a battered mahogany desk and chair, an old leather armchair, a worn leather couch, and piles of black prayer books. On the walls are old framed pictures of bearded patriarchs in desolate obsession over their Talmuds, and perhaps a few familiar scenes from the Old Testament. Downstage is a metal heating unit. There is a second heating unit upstage and a door leading apparently to a bathroom. The front door is stage left. It is 6:30 a.m. on a cold winter day. At rise, the Kabbalist stands in the middle of the synagogue, entirely wrapped in a thick white linen prayer shawl with broad black stripes. praying silently from a heavy prayer book that rests on the railing of the altar. Suddenly, he pauses in his intense devotions, clutches at the railing as if to keep himself from falling. We have the impression that he is faint, near to swooning. He is a small, bearded man in his 70s. His face is lean and lined, his eyes sunken and hollow. He wears a small black skull cap from beneath which stick out gray forelocks and side curls, a testament to his orthodoxy. After a moment, he regains his strength and returns to his prayers. 3 men hurry into the synagogue out of the oppressive cold of the street. They are the sexton, Schlissel, and Zatorsky. They all wear heavy overcoats and gray fedoras. Schlissel and Zatorsky are in their early 70s. The sexton is a small, nervous, bespectacled man of 48. We know he is a sexton because he carries a huge ring of keys. The men rub their hands for warmth and huff and puff and dart quick looks at the Kabbalist, who is oblivious to their entrance. Schlissel. Close the door. Light pours down on the synagogue as the sexton flicks on the wall switch. The sexton scurries upstage to fuss with the heater in the rear of the synagogue. Schlissel and Zatorsky shuffle downstage to a small uncovered heater and stand silently, indeed a little warily, for a moment. Schlissel sighs. So how goes it with the Jew today? Zatorsky. How should it go? Schlissel. Have a pinch of snuff. Zatorsky. No, thank you. Schlissel. Davis won't be here this morning. I stopped by his house. He has a cold. His daughter-in-law told me he's still in bed. Zatorsky. My daughter-in-law, may she grow rich and buy a hotel with 1,000 rooms and be found dead in every one of them. Schlissel. My daughter-in-law, may she invest heavily in General Motors and the whole thing should go bankrupt. Zatorsky. Sure. Go have children. Schlissel. The devil take them all. The sexton. Scurrying downstage to the Kabbalist as he passes. Hirschman, are you all right? He flutters, a small round ball of a man, to the door of the rabbi's office, which he now opens with one of the many keys on his chain. Schlissel. Foreman won't be here today. Zatorsky. What's the matter with Foreman? Schlissel. His granddaughter today. This is the morning. Zatorsky. Oh, that's right. Today is the morning. Schlissel. Listen, it's better for everybody. Zatorsky. Sure. Schlissel. I told Foreman, I said, Foreman, it's better for everybody. The girl is becoming violent. I spoke to her father. He said to me they live in terror what she'll do to the other children. They came home one night, they found watching one of the little children. Zatorsky. Well, what can you do? Schlissel. What can you do? You do what they're doing. They're putting her back in the institution. Zatorsky. Of course. There she will have the benefit of trained psychiatric personnel. Schlissel. The girl is incurable. She's been in and out of mental institutions since she was 11 years old. I met the psychiatrist there, when I was up there to visit Foreman last week. I discussed the whole business with him. A fine young fellow. The girl is a schizophrenic with violent tendencies. Zatorsky considers this diagnosis for a moment and sighs. Zatorsky. May my daughter-in-law eat acorns and may branches sprout from her ears. Schlissel. May my daughter-in-law live to be 120, and may she have to live all her years in her daughter-in-law's house. The sexton has been tugging a large, opened, brown cardboard carton out of the rabbi's office, from which he now extracts 2 velvet bags, which he hands to Schlissel and Zatorsky. The 5th old Jew now enters from the street, a patrician little man with a Van Dyke beard and a black Homburg. His name is Alper. He bursts into shrill prayer as he enters. Alper, chanting. As for me, in the abundance of thy loving kindness will I come into thy house. I will worship toward thy holy temple in the fear of thee. How goodly are thy tents, O Jacob! As precipitously as the prayer had begun, it now drops into nothing more than a rapid movement of lips. The sexton acknowledges Alper's arrival with a nod and darts back into the rabbi's office, where he plunks himself behind the desk and begins hurriedly to dial the phone. Alper's voice zooms abruptly into a shrill incantation again. Alper, in the truth of thy salvation, Amen. Schlissel, Amen. Zatorsky, Amen. Alper joins the other two old men, and they stand in silent, rueful speculation. The sexton on phone. Hello, Harris. This is Blyer the sexton. Come on down today. We need you. Foreman won't be here. Davis is sick. We won't have 10 men for the morning prayers if you don't come down. Services start in 20 minutes. Hurry up. Wear a sweater under your coat. All right. He hangs up, takes a large ledger from the desk, and begins nervously to examine its pages. Schlissel. Hirschman slept over in the synagogue again last night. Have you ever seen such a pietistic humbug? Alper. Well, he is a very devout man, a student of the Kabbalah. The rabbi speaks of him with the greatest reverence. Schlissel. Devout indeed. I assure you this lavish display of orthodoxy is a very profitable business. I was told confidentially, just yesterday that his board and food are paid for by 2 foolish old women who consider him a saint. Alper. It can't cost them very much. He's been fasting for the last 3 days. Schlissel. And the reason he sleeps in the synagogue so frequently is because his landlady does not give him heat for his own room in the mornings. Zatorsky. Go be an old man in the winter. Alper. I must say, I really don't know what to do with myself on these cold days. Schlissel. I'm an atheist. If I had something better to do, would I be here? Zatorsky. You know what would be a nice way to kill a day? I think it would be nice to take a trip up to Mount Hope Cemetery and have a look at my burial plot. A lovely cemetery. Like a golf course, actually. By the time one gets there and comes back, the whole day has been used up. Would you like to come? I'll pay both your fares. Alper. Why not? I have never been to Mount Hope. I have my burial plot on Mount Zion Cemetery. Zatorsky. Oh, that's a beautiful cemetery. Alper. Yes, it is. My wife wanted to buy plots in Cedar Lawn because her whole family is buried there, but I wouldn't hear of it. Zatorsky. Oh, Cedar Lawn. I wouldn't be buried in Cedar Lawn. Alper. It's in such a bad state. The headstones tumble one on top of the other, and everybody walks on the graves. Zatorsky. They don't take care in Cedar Lawn. My wife once said she should rest in peace, that Cedar Lawn was the tenement of cemeteries. That Cedar Lawn was the tenement of cemeteries. Alper. A well-turned phrase, I agree. Zatorsky. She had a way with words. God grant her eternal rest. Alper. I'd like you to come to Mount Zion sometime. See my plot. Zatorsky. Maybe we could make the trip tomorrow. Schlissel. Listen to these 2 idiots discussing their graves as if they were country estates. Zatorsky. Where are you buried, Schlissel? Schlissel. Cedar Lawn. Alper. Well, listen, there are many lovely areas in Cedar Lawn. All my wife's family are buried there. Zatorsky. Come with us, Schlissel, and have a look at my grave. Schlissel. Why not? What else have I got to do? Alper now slowly goes about the business of donning his prayer shawl and phylacteries, which he takes out of a velvet prayer bag. Among Jews, prayer is a highly individual matter and peripatetic to the bargain. The actual ritual of laying on the phylacteries is a colorful one. Alper extracts his left arm from his jacket and rebuttons his jacket so that his shirt-sleeved left arm hangs loose. Then the shirt sleeve is rolled up almost to the shoulder and the arm phylactery. A long, thin, black leather thong is put on by wrapping it around the left arm 7 times, 3 times around the palm and 3 times around the middle finger. All this is accompanied by rapidly recited prayers, as is the laying on the head phylactery. All the while Alper walks, bending and twisting at the knees, raising his voice occasionally in the truly lovely words of incantation. In a far upstage corner, the Kabbalist huddles under his enveloping white talith, prayer shawl, his back to everyone else, deeply involved in his personal meditations. The synagogue itself is a shabby little place, the walls yellowed and cracked, illuminated by a fitful overhead bulb. There is indeed, at this moment, a sense of agelessness, even of primitive barbarism. During this, the sexton has dialed a second number. The sexton. Hello? Mr. Arnold Kessler, please. How do you do? This is Mr. Blyer, the sexton at the synagogue. Perhaps you recall me. Did I wake you up? I'm terribly sorry. As long as you're up, according to my books, your father died 1 year ago yesterday, on the 11th day in the month of Shvat. May his soul fly straight to the heavenly gates. And how about coming down with your brother and saying a memorial prayer in your father's name? Let me put it this way, Mr. Kessler. You know we can't have morning prayers without a quorum of 10 men. If you and your brother don't come down, we won't have a quorum. As a favor to me, Kessler, may your children be such devoted sons and bring your brother. You are doing a good deed. Peace be with you. Hurry up. He hangs up, sits frowning, totaling up on his fingers the number of men he has, scowls. In the synagogue, Alper's voice rises for a brief moment. Alper, and it shall be to thee for a sign upon thy hand and for a memorial between thy eyes. The sexton rises abruptly from his chair and bustles out of the office to the front door of the synagogue. The sexton, to nobody in particular. Listen, I'm going to have to get a 10th Jew off the street somewheres. I'll be right back. Schlissel, will you please fix that bench already? You promised me. He exits. Schlissel nods and picks up a hammer. For a moment, only the sing-song murmur of the rapid prayers and the upstage tapping of Schlissel's hammer fill the stage. The front door to the synagogue now opens and a 6th old Jew peers in. He is a frightened little wisp of a man named Foreman. He is obviously in a state. He darts terrified looks all about the synagogue and then abruptly disappears back into the street, leaving the synagogue door open. Nobody noticed his brief appearance. A moment later, he is back, this time leading a slim young girl of 18 wearing a topcoat who is also distracted. The old man herds her quickly across the synagogue to the rabbi's office, pushes her in, and closes the door behind her. She stands in the rabbi's office almost rigid with terror. Foreman scuttles back to close the front door. Schlissel looks up and notices Foreman and nods to him. He nods back. Like his friends, Foreman wears a heavy winter coat and a worn fedora some sizes too small for him. He stands and watches the others apprehensively. At last, Alper reaches the end of his laying on of the phylacteries, his voice climbing to a shrill incantation. Alper, to Foreman, moving slowly as he prays. And it shall be for a sign upon thy hand, and for frontlets between thy eyes. For by strength of hand the Lord brought us out from Egypt. Amen. Foreman, muttering, his head bobbing nervously. Amen. Alper. I thought you weren't coming down today, Foreman. Foreman, his mouth working without saying anything. Finally, he says, Alper, you seem agitated. Is something wrong? Foreman, staring at his friend. Alper, I have her here. Alper, you have who here? Foreman, I have my granddaughter Evelyn here. I have her here in the rabbi's office. Alper, what are you talking about? Foreman, I took her out of the house while nobody was looking and I brought her here. I am faint. Let me sit down. He sinks onto a chair. His friend regards him with concern. Alper, here, David, let me take your coat. Foreman, Alper, I have seen such a thing and heard words as will place me in my grave before the singing of the evening service. Blessed art thou, O Lord, King of the universe, who hath wrought the wonders of the world. Suddenly, half starting from his seat, I must speak to Hirschman. This is an affair for Hirschman, who has delved into the Kabbalah and the forbidden mysteries of numbers. Alper, sit down, Foreman, and compose yourself. Foreman sinks slowly back onto his chair. Why did you bring her here? Foreman, you are my oldest friend from our days in the seminary together in Rumney in the province of Poltava, and I speak to you harshly as only a friend may speak. You are making too much out of this whole matter of the girl. I know how dear she is to you, but the girl is insane, for heaven's sakes. What sort of foolishness is this, then, to smuggle her out of your son's home? To what purpose? Really, Foreman, a gentle and pious man like you. Your son must be running through the streets at this moment shouting his daughter's name. Call him on the phone and tell him you are bringing her back to him. Foreman stares at his friend, his pale eyes filled with tears. Foreman. Alper, David, my dear friend, make peace with this situation. Foreman, whispering. She is possessed, Alper. She has a dybbuk in her, a demon. It spoke to me. He stares down at the floor at his feet, a numb terror settling over his face. It spoke to me. I went into my granddaughter this morning to comfort her, and I said, "How are you?" And she seemed quite normal. She has these moments of absolute lucidity. He looks desperately at his friend again. She seemed to know she was being taken to the institution again. And suddenly, she fell to the floor in a swoon. I said, "Evelyn, what's the matter?" And she looked up at me, and it was no longer her face, but a face so twisted with rage that my blood froze in my body. And a voice came out of her that was not her own. Do you know my voice? And I knew it. I knew the voice. God have mercy on my soul. I stood there like a statue, and my granddaughter lay on the floor with her eyes closed, and the voice came out of her, but her lips never moved. David Foreman, son of Abram, this is the soul of Hannah Luchinsky, whom you dishonored and weakened in your youth, and the gates of heaven are closed to me. And my granddaughter began to writhe on the floor as if in the most horrible agony. And she began to laugh so loudly that I was sure my son and daughter-in-law in the living room could hear. I flung the door open in panic, and my son and daughter-in-law were sitting there talking, and they heard nothing. And I tell you, shrieks of laughter were coming from this girl on the floor. And I closed the door and besought God. And finally the Dybbuk was silent. May God strike me down on this spot, Alper, if every word I tell you is not true. Alper has slowly sat down on an adjacent chair, absolutely enthralled by the story. He stares at Foreman. Alper. A Dybbuk? Foreman, nodding. A Dybbuk. Could you believe such a thing? Alper. Who did the Dybbuk say she was? Foreman. You should remember her. Hannah Luchinsky. Alper. The name is vaguely familiar. Foreman. You remember Luchinsky, the sexton of the Rumney Seminary with his 3 daughters? Hannah was the handsome one who became pregnant, and they threw stones at her, calling her a harlot, called her harlot, and drove her out of the city. Alper. Recognition slowly coming over him. Oh. Foreman. I was the one who debased her. Alper. You? You were such a nose in the books, a gentle and modest fellow. Dear me. A Dybbuk. Really? What an extraordinary thing. Schlissel, do you want to hear a story? Schlissel coming over. What? Alper. To Zatorsky, who ambles over. Listen to this. Foreman is telling a story here that will turn your blood into water. Schlissel. What happened? Foreman. What happened, Schlissel, was that I went in to see my granddaughter this morning and discovered that she was possessed by a Dybbuk. Now please, before you go into one of your interminable disputations on the role of superstition in the capitalist economy, let me remind you that I'm a follower of the Maimonides. And Schlissel, what are you talking about? Foreman, a Dybbuk. A Dybbuk. I tell you, my granddaughter is possessed by a Dybbuk. My head is just pounding. I do not know which way to turn. Schlissel, what are you prattling about Dybbuks? Alper, to Schlissel. The voice of Hannah Luchinsky spoke to him through the lips of his granddaughter. Zatorsky. Oh, a Dybbuk. Schlissel. What nonsense is this? Alper, to Foreman. Are you sure? Foreman, angrily. Am I sure? Am I a peasant who leaps at every black cat? Have I ever shown a susceptibility to mysticism? Have you not seen me engaging Hirschman over there in a violent disputation over the fanatic numerology of the Kabbalah? Have I not mocked to his very face the murky fantasy of the Gilgal with wispy souls floating in space? Really? Am I sure? Do you take me for a fool? A prattler of old wives' tales? Really? I tell you, I heard that woman's voice as I hear the cold wind outside our doors now, and saw my granddaughter writhing in the toils of possession as I see the phylactery on your brow this moment. I was a teacher of biology for 39 years at the Yeshiva High School, a dedicated follower of the great Rambam who scoffed at augurs and sorcerers. For heaven's sakes, really, I report to you only what I see. He strides angrily away, and then his brief flurry of temper subsides as abruptly as it flared. My dear Alper, please forgive this burst of temper. I am so distressed by this whole business that I cannot control my wits. I assure you that it is as hard for me to believe my own senses as it is for you. Zatorsky. When I was a boy in Lithuania, there was a young boy who worked for the butcher who was possessed by the Dybbuk. Schlissel. Scornfully. A Dybbuk. Sure. When I was a boy in Poland, I also heard stories about a man who lived in the next town who was possessed by a Dybbuk. I was 8 years old, and one day after school, my friends and I walked barefoot the 6 miles to the next town. And we asked everybody, where's the man with the Dybbuk? And nobody knew what we were talking about. So I came home and told my mother, Mama, there is no man with a Dybbuk in the next town. And she gave me such a slap across the face that I turned around 3 times. And she said to me, Aha! Only 8 years old and already an atheist. Foreman, my friend, you talk like my mother, who is an ignorant fishwife. I am shocked at you. Foreman. Oh, leave me be, Schlissel. I have no patience with your pontificating this morning. Halper. Don't let him upset you, Foreman. This man is a communist. Foreman. He is not a communist. He is just disagreeable. Schlissel. My dear fellow, I have never believed in God. Should I now believe in demons? A Dybbuk. This I would like to see. Foreman, furiously. Then see. He strides to the door of the rabbi's office and wrenches the door open. The others gingerly follow him to the opened doorway and peer in. The girl, Evelyn, stares at them, terrified. In a thunderous voice, Foreman cries out, Foreman, Dybbuk, I direct you to reveal yourself. The girl stares at the 4 patently startled old men and then suddenly bursts into a blood-curdling shriek of laughter. The 4 old men involuntarily take 1 step back and regard this exhibition wide-eyed. Foreman, what is your name? The girl. I am Hannah Luchinsky. Foreman. Who are you? The girl. I am the whore of Kiev, the companion of sailors. Foreman. How come you to be in my granddaughter's body? The girl. I was on a yacht in the Sea of Odessa, the pleasure of 5 wealthy merchants, and a storm arose and all were lost. And my soul rose from the water and flew to the city of Belgorod, where my soul appealed to the sages of that city. But since I was debauched, they turned their backs on me. Foreman. And then? The girl. Then my soul entered the body of a cow who became insane and was brought to slaughter. And I flew into the body of this girl as if divinely directed. Foreman. What do you want? The girl. I want the strength of a pure soul so that I may acquire that experience to ascend to heaven. Foreman. I plead with you to leave the body of this girl. The girl. I have wandered through Gilgal many years, and I want peace. Why do you plague me? There are those among you who have done the same as I and will suffer a similar fate. There is one among you who has lain with whores many times, and his wife died of the knowledge. Zatorsky, aghast. Oh my God. The girl, laughing. Am I to answer questions of old men who have nothing to do but visit each other's cemeteries? Zatorsky, terrified. A Dybbuk. Foreman. Evelyn. She is again in a catatonic. The girl now sits in the rabbi's chair, sprawling wantonly, apparently finished with the interview. The 4 old men regard her a little numbly. They are all quite pale as a result of the experience. After a moment, Foreman closes the door of the rabbi's office and the 4 old men shuffle in a silent group downstage, where they stand, each reviewing in his own mind the bizarre implications of what they have seen. Foreman sinks into a chair and covers his face with his hands. After a long moment, Zatorsky speaks. Zatorsky. Well, that's some Dybbuk, all right. Schlissel. The girl is as mad as a hatter and fancies herself a Ukrainian trollop. This is a Dybbuk? Alper. I found it quite an unnerving experience. Zatorsky. She caught me dead to rights, I'll tell you that. I was the one she was talking about there, who trumpeted around with women. Listen, when I was in the garment business, if you didn't have women for the out-of-town buyers, you couldn't sell a dozen dresses. Oh, I was quite a gamey fellow when I was in the business. A madcap, really. One day my wife caught me in the shop with a model. Who knew she would be downtown that day? And from that moment on, my wife was a sick woman and died 3 years later, cursing my name with her last breath. That was some Dybbuk, all right. How she picked me out. It gave me the shivers. Alper. Did you notice her use of archaic language and her Russian accent? The whole business had an authentic ring to me. Schlissel. What nonsense. The last time I was up to Foreman's, the girl confided to me in a whisper that she was Susan Hayward. A Dybbuk. Ever since she was a child, Foreman has been pumping her head full of the wretched superstitions of the Russian Pale, so she thinks she is a Dybbuk. The girl is a lunatic and should be packed off to an asylum immediately. Alper. Really, Schlissel, must you always be so argumentative? We are all here agreed that we have a Dybbuk in our company, but you always seem intent on being at odds with everyone around you. Really, look at poor Foreman, how distraught he is. Out of simple courtesy, really, for an old friend, can you not affect at least a silence on the matter? And after all, what else have you got to do today? Ride 2.5 hours to look at Zatorsky's tombstone? When you stop and think of it, the Dybbuk is quite an exciting affair. Really, nothing like this has happened since Kornblum and Milski had that fist fight over who would have the seat by the east wall during the high holidays. Zatorsky, ambling over. That's some Dybbuk, all right. Schlissel, frowning. All right, so what do we do with this Dybbuk now that we got it? Alper. It seems to me there is some kind of ritual, an exorcism of sorts. Zatorsky. Maybe we should tell the rabbi. Schlissel. A young fellow like that? What does he know of Dybbuks? A Dybbuk must be exorcised from the body by a rabbi of some standing. You can't just call in some smooth-shaven young fellow fresh from the seminary for such a formidable matter as a Dybbuk. This rabbi has only been here 2 months. He hardly knows our names. Alper. He's right. You have to get a big rabbi for such a business. Schlissel. What has to be done is we must get in touch with the Korpochniker rabbi of Williamsburg, who has inherited the mantle of the great Korpochniker of Lwów, whose fame extends to all the corners of the world. Zatorsky. Oh, a sage among sages. Alper. I was about to suggest the Bolbovitcher rabbi of Crown Heights. Schlissel. Where do you come to compare the Bolbovitcher rabbi with Korpochniker? Alper. I once attended an afternoon service conducted by the Bolbovitcher, and it was an exalting experience. A man truly in the great tradition of Chassidic rabbis. Zatorsky. A sage among sages, may his name be blessed forever and ever. Schlissel. It shows how much you know. The Bolbovitcher rabbi is a disciple of the Korpochniker and sat at the Korpochniker's feet until a matter only a few years ago. Alper. Listen, I'm not going to argue with you. Either one is fine for me. Schlissel. The Korpochniker is the #1 Chassidic rabbi in the world. If you're going to involve yourself at all, why not go straight to the top? Alper. All right, so let it be the Korpochniker. Zatorsky. For that matter, the Lubinauer rabbi of Brownsville is a man of great repute. Schlissel. The Lubinauer, really? He's a young man, for heaven's sake. Alper. Zatorsky, Let it be decided then that it will be the Korpachniker. Zatorsky. I only made a suggestion. Schlissel. The question is, how does one get to the Korpachniker? One does not drop into his home as if it were a public library. One has to solicit his secretary and petition for an audience. It may take weeks. Alper. I do think, Schlissel, we shall have to get a more accessible rabbi than that. Ah, here is Hirschman. Sure can give us excellent counsel in this matter. The Kabbalist has indeed finished his prayers and is shuffling downstage. A small, frightened man. Foreman leaps from his chair. Foreman, Hirschman! Everyone crowds around the Kabbalist. Zatorsky. Oh boy, Hirschman, have we got something to tell you? Alper. Zatorsky, please. Hirschman, you are a man versed in the Kabbalah, a man who prays with all the 72 names of the most ancient of the ancient ones. Foreman, blurting out, Hirschman, my granddaughter is possessed by a Dybbuk. The Kabbalist, starting back in terror. A Dybbuk? Alper. Foreman, please. One does not announce such a thing as baldly as that. The Kabbalist. Are you sure? Foreman. Hirschman, as a rule, I am not given to whimsy. The Kabbalist. Was it the soul of a woman wronged in her youth? Foreman. Yes. The Kabbalist. I heard her cry out last night. I awoke from my midnight devotions, and as I prayed, I heard the whimpering of a woman's soul. A strange expression of wonder settles over his face. I have fasted 3 days and 3 nights, and I dismissed the sound of this Dybbuk as a fantasy of my weakened state. For only those to whom the Ancient One has raised his veil can hear the traffic of Dybbuks. Is this a sign from God that my penitence is over? I have prayed for such a sign. I have felt strange things these past days. Sudden, bursting illuminations have bleached mine eyes, and I have heard the sounds of dead and supernatural things. He lifts his worn little face, his eyes wide with wonder. The others are put a little ill at ease by this effusive outburst. Foreman indeed is quite overwhelmed. Alper. Actually, Hirschman, all we want to know is if you knew the telephone number of the Korpachniker rabbi. The Kabbalist, with some effort, brings himself back to the moment at hand. The Kabbalist. He is my cousin. I will call him for you. He moves slowly off, still obsessed with some private wonder of his own, to the phone on the outside wall of the rabbi's office. Alper. Quite odd. Your cousin? You are the Korpachniker's cousin, Hirschman? Zatorsky, hurrying after the Kabbalist. You'll need a dime, Hirschman. He gives the Kabbalist the 10-cent piece. Alper. Schlissel, the Korpachniker's cousin, did you hear? Apparently he's not such a humbug. Schlissel. I tell you, he gives me the creeps, that Hirschman. The Kabbalist has dialed the number on the wall phone. Foreman stands at his elbow, hunched with anxiety. The Kabbalist, to Foreman gently. Where is she, the Dybbuk? Foreman, in the rabbi's office. The Kabbalist. You are wise to go to the Korpachniker. He is a righteous one among the righteous ones. We were quite close as children until I abandoned the rabbinate. On the phone, in soft, gentle tones. Hello, is this Chaim, son of Yosef? This is Israel, son of Isaac, and peace be unto you. There is a man here of my congregation who feels his granddaughter is possessed by a Dybbuk and would seek counsel from my cousin. He will bless you for your courtesy. Peace be unto you, Chaim, son of Yosef. He hangs the receiver back in its cradle and turns to Foreman. Give me a paper and pencil. The others, who have crowded around to hear the phone call, all seek in their pockets for a paper and pencil and manage to produce an old envelope and a stub of pencil between them. That was the Korpachnicker's secretary, and you are to go to his home as quickly as you can. I will write the address down for you. It is in Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and you will be received directly after the morning services. He gives Foreman the address, sweeps his prayer shawl on, and retires upstage for continued devotions. Foreman. Thank you, Hirschman. The eye of the Lord will be open to you in the time of your need. Zatorsky. Oh, Williamsburg. That's quite a ride from here. Schlissel. What are you talking about? Foreman, you take the Long Island Railroad to Atlantic Avenue Station, where you go downstairs and you catch the Brooklyn subway. Alper. Maybe I should go along with you, David, because a simple fellow like you will certainly get lost in the Atlantic Avenue Station, which is an immense conflux of subways. Schlissel. What you do, Foreman, is you take the Long Island Railroad to the Atlantic Avenue Station, where you take the double G train on the lower level. Alper. Not the double G train. Schlissel. What's wrong with the double G? Alper. One takes the Brighton train. The double G train will take him to Smith Street, which is a good 8 blocks walk. Schlissel. The Brighton train will take him to Coney Island. Alper. Foreman, listen to... I will write down the instructions for you because an innocent fellow like you, if they didn't point you in the right direction, you couldn't even find the synagogue in the morning. Where's my pencil? He has taken the paper and pencil from Foreman's numb fingers and is writing down the traveling instructions. Foreman, staring off at the wall of the rabbi's office. What shall I do with the girl? I can't leave her here. Alper. Don't worry about the girl. She knows me. I'm like a second grandfather to her. Foreman. I don't like to leave her. Did I do all right, Alper? Or did I do right, Alper? Did I do right, kidnapping her this morning and bringing her here? Because the psychiatrist said we must prepare ourselves that she would probably spend the rest of her life in mental institutions. The irrevocability of it. The rest of her life. I was in tears almost the whole night thinking about it. Perhaps this produced a desperate susceptibility in me so that I clutch even at Dybbuk's rather than believe she is irretrievably insane. Now in the sober chill of afterthought, it all seems so unreal and impetuous. And here I am bucketing off to some forbidding rabbi to listen to mystical incantations. Alper. The Korpachnicker is not a rogue, Foreman. He is not going to sell you a patent medicine. He will advise you quite sensibly, I am sure. Foreman, buttoning his coat. Yes. I shall go to see him. You shall have to hide her till I come back. My son has probably called the police by now, and sooner or later they will come here looking for her. Alper. Don't worry about it. I won't leave her side for a moment. Foreman. I better tell her I'm going. She'll be frightened if she looks for me and I'm not here. He hurries quickly to the rabbi's office, where he stands a moment, regarding the girl with mingled fear and tenderness. The girl has sunk into the blank detachment of schizophrenia and stares unseeingly at the floor. Schlissel. So the girl is a fugitive from the police. The situation is beginning to take on charm. Alper. Look at Schlissel, the retired revolutionary. As long as it's against the law, he believes in Dybbuk's. Schlissel. I believe in anything that involves a conspiracy. At this point, the front door bursts open and the sexton returns with the announcement. The sexton. I've got the 10th Jew. Zatorsky. Sexton, have we got something to tell you? Schlissel, shushing him abruptly. Shh, idiot. Must you tell everyone? The sexton. He leans back through the open door to the street and says to someone out there, "Come in, come in." A fine-looking, if troubled young fellow in his middle 30s enters. He is dressed in expensive clothes, albeit a little shabby at the moment, as if he had been on a bender for the last couple of days. His name is Arthur Landau. He stands ill at ease and scowling, disturbed in aspect. His Burberry topcoat hangs limply on him. The sexton has scooted to an open carton from which he takes out a black paper skull cap, nervously talking as he does. The sexton. "Harris didn't come in yet?" Schlissel. "No." The sexton. "The two Kessler boys. I called them on the phone. They didn't show up yet?" He thrusts the skull cap into Arthur's hand. "Here's the skull cap. Put it on." Arthur takes the skull cap absently, but makes no move to put it on. He is preoccupied with deep and dark thoughts. The sexton heads for the front door. The sexton. "The rabbi's not here yet?" Schlissel. "He'll be here in a couple of minutes." The sexton. "It's only 7 minutes to the services. Listen, I'm going to the Kesslers. I'll have to pull them out of their beds, I can see that. I'll be right back." To Arthur. "You'll find some phylacteries in the carton there. Alper, give the man a prayer book. Sure, go find 10 Jews on a winter morning." He exits, closing the front door. Foreman, as he comes out of the office. "All right, I'm going. She didn't eat anything this morning, so she gets some coffee at least. Let's see. I take the Long Island Railroad to Atlantic Avenue Station. Listen, it's been a number of years since I have been on the subways. Well, wish me luck. Have I got money for car fare?" Yes. Well, my dear friends, peace be with you. Alper. And with you, Foreman. Zatorsky. Amen. Foreman, opening the door. "Oh, it's cold out here." He exits, closing the door. Alper. "He'll get lost, I'm sure of it." Zatorsky. "Oh, have you ever seen such excitement? My heart is fairly pounding." "Oh, it's just starting. Now comes the exorcism. That should be something to see." Zatorsky. "Oh boy." Schlissel. "Oh, I don't know. You've seen one exorcism, you've seen them all." Zatorsky. "You saw one, Schlissel?" Schlissel. "Sure. When I was a boy in Poland, we had more Dybbuk's than we had pennies. We had a fellow there in my village, a mule driver, a burly chap who reeked from dung and was drunk from morning till night. One day, he lost his wits completely, and it was immediately attributed to a Dybbuk. I was a boy of 10, perhaps 11, and I watched the whole proceedings through a hole in the roof of the synagogue. A miracle-working rabbi who was passing through our district was invited to exorcise the Dybbuk. He drew several circles on the ground and stood in the center surrounded by 4 elders of the community, all dressed in white linen and trembling with terror. The miracle worker bellowed out a series of incantations, and the poor mule driver, who was beside himself with fear, screamed. And, hello, Harris. This last is addressed to a very, very old man named Harris, who was making his halting way into the synagogue at this moment. He barely nods to the others, having all he can do to get into the synagogue and close the door. Schlissel continues his blithe story. And fell to the floor. It was a marvelous vaudeville, really. I was so petrified that I fell off the roof and almost broke a leg. The miracle worker wandered off to work other miracles, and the mule driver sold his mule and went to America, where, I assume, because he was a habitual drunkard and an insensitive bore, he achieved considerable success. Our little village had a brief month of notoriety, and we were all quite proud of ourselves. Alper. Oh, it sounds like a marvelous ceremony. Schlissel. Of course. They don't exercise Dybbuk's like they used to. Nowadays, the rabbi hangs a small amulet around your neck, intones, Blessed art thou, O Lord, and that's an exorcism. Alper. Oh, I hope not. Schlissel. Really, religion has become so pallid recently it is hardly worthwhile being an atheist. Zatorsky. I don't even know if I'll come to see this exorcism. I'm already shivering just hearing about it. Alper. Well, we are dealing with the occult here, and it is quite frightening. Hello there, Harris. How are you? By now the octogenarian has removed his overcoat, under which he wears several layers of sweaters, one of which turns out to be one of his grandson's football jerseys, a striped red garment with the number 63 on it. For the rest of the act, he goes about the business of putting on his phylacteries. Alper claps his hands. Alper. Well, let me find out if we can help this young Jew here. He moves toward Arthur Landau, smiling. Can I give you a set of phylacteries? Arthur, scowling. A man who has had a very bad night the night before. I'm afraid I wouldn't have the first idea what to do with them. Alper. You'll find a prayer shawl in one of those velvet bags here. Arthur. No, thank you. Alper. Offering a small black prayer book. Well, here's a prayer book anyway. Arthur. Look, the only reason I'm here is a little man stopped me on the street, asked me if I was Jewish, and gave me the impression he would kill himself if I didn't come in and complete your quorum. I was told all I had to do was stand around for a few minutes wearing a hat. I can't read Hebrew, and I have nothing I want to pray about, so there's no sense giving me that book. All I want to know is how long this is going to take, because I don't feel very well, and I have a number of things to do. Alper. My dear young fellow, you'll be out of here in 15 or 20 minutes. Arthur. Thank you. He absently puts the black paper skull cap on his head and sits down, scowling, on one of the wooden chairs. Alper regards him for a moment, then turns and goes back to his two colleagues. Alper. To Schlissel and Zatorsky. To such a state has modern Jewry fallen. He doesn't know what phylacteries are. He doesn't want a shawl. He can't read Hebrew. Zatorsky. I wonder if he's still circumcised. Arthur abruptly stands. Arthur. I'd like to make a phone call. Nobody hears him. He repeats louder. I said I'd like to make a phone call. Alper, indicating the wall phone. Right on the wall there. Arthur. This is a rather personal call. Alper. There's a phone in the rabbi's office there. Arthur crosses to the rabbi's office. Schlissel. Well, look about you, really. Here you have the decline of Orthodox Judaism graphically before your eyes. This is a synagogue, a converted grocery store flanked on one side by a dry cleaner and on by a shoemaker. Really, if it wasn't for the Holy Ark there, this place would look like the local headquarters of the American Labor Party. In Poland, where we were all one step from starvation, we had a synagogue whose shadow had more dignity than this place. Alper. It's a shame and a disgrace. Zatorsky. A shame and a disgrace. In the rabbi's office, Arthur is regarding the girl with a sour eye. Arthur. Excuse me, I'd like to make a rather personal call. The girl stares down at the floor, unhearing, unmoving, off in a phantasmic world of her own distorted creation. Arthur sits down at the rabbi's desk, turns his shoulder to the girl, and begins to dial a number. Schlissel. Where are all the Orthodox Jews? They have apostated to the Reformed Jewish temples where they sit around like Episcopalians listening to organ music. Alper. Your use of the word apostasy as referring to Reformed Jews interests me, Schlissel. Is it not written in the Deuteronomy, Even if they are foolish, even if they transgress, even if they are full of blemishes, they are still called sons. So after all, is it so terrible to be a Reformed Jew? Is this not an interesting issue for disputation? Oh my God. He wheels and starts back for the rabbi's office. The same thought has been entering the other two old fellows' minds, as has been indicated by a growing frown of consternation on each of their faces. They follow Alper to the rabbi's office, where he opens the door quickly and stares in at Arthur Landau. The latter is still seated at the rabbi's desk, waiting for an answer to his phone call. And the girl is still in her immobilized state. Arthur casts such a baleful eye at this interruption that the three old men back out of the office and close the door. They remain nervously outside the door of the office. At last, someone responds to Arthur's phone call. Arthur, on the phone, shading his face and keeping his voice down. Hello, doctor? Did I wake you up? This is Arthur Landau. Yes, I know. Do you think you can find an hour for me this morning? Oh, I could be in your office in about an hour or so. I'm out in Mineola. My ex-wife lives out here with her parents, you know. And I've been blind or drunk for, I just figured it out, 3 days now. And I just found myself out here at 2 o'clock in the morning banging on their front door screaming. The girl's presence bothers him. He leans across the desk to her and says, Look, this is a very personal call, and I would really appreciate you letting me have the use of this office for just a few minutes. The girl looks up at him blankly. The girl, hollowly. The girl, hollowly. I am the whore of Kiev, the companion of sailors. The bizarreness of this stops Arthur. He considers it for a moment and then goes back to the phone. Arthur, on the phone. No, I'm still here. I'm all right. At least I'm still alive. He hides his face in the palm of one hand and rubs his brow nervously. I've got to see a doc. Don't hang up on me, please. If my analyst hangs up on me, that'll be the end. Just let me talk a couple of minutes. I'm in some damned synagogue. I was on my way to the subway. Oh my God, I've got to call my office. I was supposed to be in court twice yesterday. I hope somebody had the brains to apply for an adjournment. So it's funny, you know, I'm in this damned synagogue. I'll be down in about an hour, doctor. Okay, I'm all right. No, I'm all right. I'll see you in about an hour. He hangs up, hides his face in the palms of both hands, and slowly pulls himself together. After a moment, he looks up at the girl, who is back to staring at the floor. He frowns, stands, goes to the door of the office, opens it, gives one last look at the girl, and closes the door behind him. He finds himself staring at the inquiring face of the three old men. Listen, I hope you know there's a pretty strange girl in there. The old men bob their heads nervously. Arthur crosses the synagogue to a chair and sits down, his face dark with his emotions. The three old men regard him anxiously. After a moment, Schlissel approaches Arthur. Schlissel. A strange girl, you say? Arthur. Yes. Schlissel. Did she say anything? Arthur. She said, I am the whore of Kiev, the companion of sailors. Schlissel. That was a very piquant statement, wouldn't you say? Arthur. Yes, I think I would call it piquant. Schlissel. What do you make of it? Arthur, irritably. I have 100 things to do. Schlissel. No. Sit down. For heaven's sakes, sit down. Alper, hurrying over. Don't go. Oh my, don't go. We need you for a 10th man. We haven't had 10 men in the morning in more than a week, I think. Satorsky. on Alper's tail. 2 weeks at least. At this point, Harris, who has finally divested himself of his muffler and the heavy ribbed sweaters which were over his jacket, is now wrapped in a prayer shawl and bursts into a high, quavering prayer. Harris. Blessed art thou, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, who hath sanctified us by his commandments, and... The words dribble off into inaudibility. Arthur Landau darts a startled look at the old man, not being prepared for this method of prayer, and moves a few nervous steps away from the other old men, then stands rubbing his brow, quite agitated. Alper, whispering to Schlissel. So what happened in there? Did she say anything? Schlissel. Yes. She said she was the whore of Kiev and the companion of sailors. Alper. Oh dear me. Schlissel. I'm afraid we shall have to get her out of the rabbi's office, because if she keeps telling everybody who walks in there that she is the whore of Kiev, they will pack us all off to the insane asylum. And let us be quite sensible about the situation. If Foreman has kidnapped the girl, he has kidnapped her. However, kindly his motives, not that I expect the police to regard a Dybbuk as any kind of a sensible explanation. Whatever the case, it would be a good idea to keep the girl a little less accessible. The wall phone rings. Ah! I'll tell you who that is. That's Foreman's son calling to find out if Foreman and the girl are here. The phone rings again. Well, if you won't answer it, I'll answer it. He crosses to the wall phone. Alper. We could take her to my house. Everybody is still sleeping. We'll put her in the cellar. The phone rings again. Schlissel picks up the phone. Schlissel on the phone. Hello? He turns to the others and nods, indicating he was right in guessing the caller. The other two old men move closer to the phone. Mr. Foreman, your father isn't here. Listen, I tell you, he isn't here. I wouldn't have the slightest idea. I haven't seen her since I was up to your house last Tuesday. Isn't she home? If he comes in, I'll tell him. Okay. He hangs up and turns to the other two. Well, we are in it up to our necks now. Alper, stripping off his phylacteries. So, shall we take her to my house? Schlissel. All right. Zatorsky, go in and tell her we are going to take her to someplace else. Zatorsky, not exactly inspired by the idea. Yeah, sure. Schlissel to Zatorsky. For heaven's sake, Zatorsky, you don't really believe that's a Dybbuk in there? Zatorsky. If that's no Dybbuk, then you go in and take her. Schlissel shuffles slowly to the door of the rabbi's office. Schlissel, pausing at the closed office door. It's getting kind of complicated. Maybe we ought to call Foreman's son and tell him she's here and not get involved. Zatorsky. Oh no! Schlissel. Well, come on, what can they do to us? They'll call us foolish old men, but then foolishness is only the privilege of old age. So, Alper, you'll deal with her. You know how to talk to her, and we'll hide her in your cellar. So we'll have a little excitement. He opens the door, and the three old men regard the girl as she sits in the sudden, detached immobility. Listen, Alper, let's get along, you know, before the sexton comes back and starts asking us where we're all going. Alper nods apprehensively and takes a few steps into the office. Alper, to the girl who doesn't actually hear him or know of his presence. How do you do, my dear Evelyn? This is Alper here. She makes no answer. Alper turns to the other two. She's in one of her apathetic states. Zatorsky, darting back into the synagogue proper. I'll get your coat, Alper. Schlissel, looking around to see if Arthur is paying any attention to what's going on. He is not. Well, take her by the arm. Alper, Evelyn, your grandfather suggested we take you to my house. You always liked to play with children's toys in my cellar there, you remember? Come along and we'll have a good time. Zatorsky, giving Schlissel an overcoat. Here, give this to Alper. He hurries off to the front door of the synagogue. Harris, in the process of laying on his phylacteries. And from thy wisdom, O most high God, thou shalt reserve for me. He dribbles off into inaudibility. Olper, placing a tentative hand on the girl's shoulder. Evelyn, dear? She looks up, startled. Zatorsky, leaning out the front door, searching up and down the street. Oh, it's cold out here. Olper, to Schlissel, who is hurriedly putting on his own overcoat. I have a feeling we're going to have trouble here. Schlissel, I've got your coat here. Olper. Evelyn. A strange, animal-like grunt escapes the girl, and she begins to moan softly. Evelyn, dear, please don't be alarmed. This is Mr. Olper here, who has known you since you were born. He is getting a little panicky as the strange sounds coming out of the girl, and he is getting a little panicky at the strange sounds coming out of the girl, and he tries to grab her arm to help her to her feet. She bursts into a shrill scream, electrifying everybody in the synagogue with the exception of the Kabbalist, who is oblivious to everything. Zatorsky, who has just closed the front door, stands frozen with horror. Arthur, sunk in despondency, looks up startled. The old man Harris pauses briefly as if the sound has been some distant buzzing and then goes back to his mumbled prayers. Olper. Evelyn, my dear girl, for heaven's sakes. The girl screaming out, leave me alone! Leave me alone! Arthur, coming to Schlissel, who shuts the office door quickly. What's going on in there? Schlissel, no, it's nothing. The girl screaming. They are my 7 sons, my 7 sons. Olper, who is trying earnestly to get out of the office. Who closed this door? Zatorsky, reaching for the front door. I'm getting out of here. Schlissel, where are you going? But Zatorsky has already fled into the street. Arthur to Schlissel. What's all this screaming? Olper, at last out of the office, comes scurrying to Schlissel. Olper. I put my hand on her arm to help her up, and she bursts into this fit of screaming. Arthur strides to the open doorway of the office. The girl stares at him, hunched now in terror, frightened, and at bay. Arthur to Schlissel. What have you been doing to this girl? Schlissel. The girl is possessed by a Dybbuk. Arthur. What? Schlissel to Olper. Zatorsky ran out in the street like a kangaroo. Olper. Listen, maybe we should call somebody. Arthur. Listen, what is this? Olper. My dear young man, there is no reason to alarm yourself. There is an insane girl in the rabbi's office, but she appears to have quieted down. Arthur. What do you mean there's an insane girl in the rabbi's office? Olper. Yes, she is a catatonic schizophrenic, occasionally violent, but really, go back to your seat. There's no cause for alarm. Arthur. Am I to understand, sir, that it is a practice of yours to keep insane girls in your rabbi's office? Olper. No. Oh dear, I suppose we shall have to tell him. But you must promise, my dear fellow, to keep this whole matter between us. To Schlissel. Zatorsky, you say took to his heels? Schlissel. Absolutely flew out of the door. Olper. Well, I can't really blame him. It was quite an apprehensive moment. I was a little shaken myself. He peeks into the office. Yes, she seems to be quite apathetic again. I think we just better leave her alone for the time being. Arthur. Look, what is going on here? Olper. My dear fellow, you are, of course, understandably confused. The girl you see is possessed by a Dybbuk. Arthur. Yes, of course. Well, that explains everything. Olper. Well, of course, how would he know what a Dybbuk is? A Dybbuk is a migratory soul that possesses the body of another human being in order to return to heaven. It is a Lurian doctrine, actually tracing back to the Essenes, I suppose, but popularized during the 13th century by the Spanish Kabbalists. I wrote several articles on the matter for Yiddish periodicals. My name is Moishe Alper, and at one time I was a journalist of some repute. Zatorsky appears in the doorway again, peering nervously in. Come in, Zatorsky, come in. The girl is quiet again. Zatorsky approaches them warily. Arthur. Look, are you trying to tell me you have a girl in there you think is possessed by some demon? Where is her mother or father or somebody who should be responsible for her? Alper. If there were someone responsible for her, would she be insane in the first place? Arthur. Of course, this is none of my business. Alper. You are a good fellow, and let me put you at ease. The girl is in good hands. Nobody is going to hurt her. Her grandfather, who adores her more than his own life, has gone off for a short while. Zatorsky. To Williamsburg on the Brighton train. Schlissel. The Brighton train takes you to Coney Island. Zatorsky. You said the double G. Alper. All right. Arthur. Of course, this is none of my business. Alper to Arthur. I can understand your concern. It shows you are a good fellow, but really the matter is well in hand. The front door opens, and there now enter the sexton and two young men in their 30s, apparently the Kessler boys, who are none too happy about being roused on this cold winter morning. They stand disconsolately around in the back of the synagogue. The sexton. Here are two more, the Kessler boys. Alper. Now we'll have 10 for a quorum. Zatorsky. Kessler? Oh, yes. The stationery store. I knew your father. There is a general flurry of movement. The sexton hurries about the ritual of baring his left arm, donning the prayer shawl and the phylacteries, walking nervously about, mumbling his prayers rapidly. Arthur, quite disturbed again, looks into the rabbi's office at the girl, then moves slowly into the office. The girl is again in a world of her own. He closes the door and studies the girl. Schlissel, Alper, and Zatorsky watch him warily, taking off their overcoats again and preparing to stay for the impending services. Harris's shrill, quavering voice suddenly leaps up into audibility again. Harris. Thou shalt set apart all that openeth the womb of the Lord, and the firstling that cometh of a beast which thou shalt have, it shall belong to the Lord. To the Lord. Schlissel to Alper. What are we going to do when the rabbi tries to get into his office? He'll see the girl, and that will be the end of our exorcism. What shall we tell the rabbi? The front door of the synagogue opens, and the rabbi comes striding efficiently in, right on cue. He is a young man in his early 30s, neatly dressed, if a little threadbare, and carrying a briefcase. Zatorsky. Peace be with you, Rabbi. The rabbi. Peace be with you. Alper, intercepting the rabbi as he heads for his office. How do you do, Rabbi? The rabbi nods as he strides to the door of his office, where Schlissel blocks the way. Schlissel. We have 10 men today, Rabbi. The rabbi. Good. He reaches for the door to his office. I'll just get my phylacteries. Alper, seizing Zatorsky's phylacteries. Oh, here, use these. It's late, Rabbi. The rabbi taking the phylacteries. Fine. Well, let's start the services. He turns back to the synagogue proper. From all around, each man's voice rises into prayer. The curtain falls. And I think I'm going to stop it there. I want to continue on, but I don't have enough time. So, this is really fucking funny, this play. I really like it. I'm sure, I think I said something about not knowing the quote unquote Jewish language. You mean Hebrew? Yeah. But this play is really funny. I think the concept of old Jewish men not knowing what to do with a quote unquote schizophrenic girl who is quote unquote possessed by a Dybbuk. And I think that's how you pronounce it. I think I've heard of that before. I think it's hilarious. And I'm very curious to see what the end is. And I'll read it on the channel since I've gone this far, but maybe tomorrow. But I like that as a Gentile, I think I did all right. But I like that they're debating about which rabbi to seek counsel from, and they're comparing the rabbis like a Yelp review. Well, like, yeah, this one's all right, but yeah, this one, and when talking about what to do for an exorcism. And I like that they're each coming from different schools of thought and different schools of theism, down from like the extremes where some are completely theistic and others are atheistic. And I think it's interesting. It's really humorous. I especially find it humorous that the old men are trying to like understand the girl, and she just keeps saying, "I'm the whore of Kiev." It's just like, what do you do in that situation? And I guess we're gonna find out. Going to pretend, they're gonna pretend an exorcism, and I assume they're going to have to send her to an insane asylum. But I don't know. We'll see. Let's see. Maybe they'll maybe she'll be deemed the new ancient of the ancient ones, or she'll be christened a saint or something. I haven't read anything about this play. I went in cold, and going in cold for stories is the best, because that's how it should be. It's a surprise. But I think I'm going to call it tonight on that. And this has been. I enjoyed this. I didn't quite know how it would turn out, not knowing anything, hardly anything about Judaism. But I'm enjoying this, so I'll try to continue it tomorrow. And I think the bulk of what I know about Judaism is from A Serious Man with the Coen Brothers movie, which I highly recommend. It's hilarious, and any Jewish terminology I know from that movie. And Michael Stuhlbarg does a beautiful job as in the lead role. And yeah, I think I'm gonna call it a night, because I've got, yeah. I don't know. I'll continue this tomorrow. I'm mumbling because I'm trying to figure out how to end this, but there's no other way to end this other than saying I will continue on this tomorrow. I appreciate those that stayed with me. I hope this was somewhat entertaining, and thanks for listening. I love you. See you tomorrow.